Welcome back. My name is Chris Bores, the Ghost Doctor, and for today's episode, I wanted to post an interview that I did on a national broadcast radio show because this was a big deal. Now, this show is called Coast to Coast. I've been a fan of this show for a very, very long time, and they've had some great guests on the program over the years, and to be part of that was a real treat for me. And it was interesting because even to get on this show, I really had to haggle with them and be like, look, here's some of the stuff that I found in the field, and I could talk about like rules to the afterlife, and that really intrigued them. Now, this interview is 2 hours long. I hope you sit through it because it's audio only, so there's no visual. And the interesting thing I want to point out about this interview is the next day I went to the Coast to Coast website, and they actually did an article about there being rules to the afterlife. And I never saw anyone on their show get an article about what they talked about the night previous. So this must have been a big thing to cover. And I'm so glad it got out there, and I hope people grab a hold of this message. But yeah, what a great thing to be a part of, and you can listen to it now. Enjoy.
Well, let me tell you about our special guest tonight now. Chris Bores is a paranormal communicator. He runs a ghost tour guide in Toledo, Ohio. He's created a new approach to ghost hunting. What does he do? Interacts with spirits and interviews them. He has spent years studying a wide variety of topics, including the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, both fascinating reads, by the way, psychology, and so much more. Now, incorporating all these concepts into his approach, his spiritual interactions have lasted 30, 60, even 90 minutes long. That's amazing. Insights documented nowhere else can finally be achieved, and here he is on Coast to Coast. Chris, this is going to be fun. Hi.
I think so. I've been a fan of Coast to Coast for a very long time, and I'm very excited to talk about a lot of reveals that I've gotten from the spirit realm.
How are things in Toledo, by the way?
Very good. It's starting to cool down, so fall is fast approaching.
That weather, the fall weather up there in the Midwest, though, it is the best. You can't beat it.
Yeah, you can't beat it.
How'd you get involved in all this? Ghost hunting, communicating, tours.
Well, I was a big fan of all the ghost hunting shows. As you know, ghost hunting really hit its peak in the late, around 2009 or so. And you could tell just by checking out the network programming. It seemed like every network had their own paranormal show. And there came a point where the programming, there was just a glut of it on TV. And as I was sifting through all this paranormal programming, I loved it. I watched it all. But there came a point where I found that my mindset was evolving way past what they were collecting on TV. And I just felt that a deeper level could be achieved by interacting with spirits. It seemed like the best answer, the best questions they would ask these spirits is, do you feel happy here? And maybe a couple other different questions. And they ask the same things over and over again. And I sat there thinking, gosh, there's so much more that we could ask these spirits. There's got to be a deeper level to this all.
And I always notice, too, Chris, when you watch these programs, and they're well produced, that they have to have some kind of interaction with a ghost, or something has to happen. Or you've got a dull 30-minute show. So I've always wondered, are they making some of these things up? What do you think?
I don't know if they're making things up. As far as getting interactions, it seemed like all these paranormal groups were very good at finding the paranormal. I mean, it seemed really easy to do. It just seemed like they lacked the skills on what to do once they got interactions with a spirit. It seemed like they constantly dropped the ball, and that's where I wanted to come in and really change things.
And you've taken ghost hunting literally to another level, haven't you?
I tried. I have brought a lot of concepts together that aren't normally found in the ghost hunting tool bag. I mean, being a ghost hunter, I do use the same type of tools that everybody else uses, like the K2 meter, the obelisk, EMF readers. But in order for me to find that deeper level of interaction, I had used things like psychology, philosophy, ancient texts. I've even brought quantum physics to the table. And when you bring paradigms and concepts out of those fields of research. It just opens up the door for how to talk to a spirit, how to engage them, and figure out, what it's all about.
So you brought science to ghost investigating and hunting.
Exactly. Yeah, there's just so many facets to this that tie a lot of different aspects of the paranormal world together. There's just so many different areas, and it's just amazing how all this stuff ties together. I mean, residual hauntings, aliens. We can start piecing all this stuff together in a way that no one's ever seen before.
Oh, that's amazing. And you also brought in a little touch of psychology into all of this. How does that work?
Yeah, so if you read up on psychology, you will see that human behavior is a big part of this. And when you go out and start interacting with spirits, you'll kind of see personality bleed through these communication devices like the K2 meter and whatnot. And I've found that once you start interacting with them enough, you can actually use the same type of psychology. There's like a field called human response psychology. It works the same as living humans as it does people without a body. And you will see that it's pretty much the same.
Have you ever had a bad experience on any of these missions?
Yeah, there was one time I do ghost tours at a place called the Collingwood Art Center here in Toledo. And in the basement, I've been able to contact with a wide variety of spirits. And I had a moment down there when I was trying to make contact. We were getting some weird spikes on the meter, and I was asking, I decided to ask, do you not want us down here? And the meter spiked. So, of course, being who I am, I was kind of being a jerk at the point. I said, okay, well, if you want us to leave, make a noise for us. We waited for a couple seconds. Nothing happened. And I said, well, do you really want us to leave? A few seconds later, the meter spiked as strong as it could. And at the same time, I started feeling a weird sensation on the back of my neck. And it started to grow in intensity to the point where it felt like needles being driven into my neck. And it affected me so much that I had to say, okay, we're leaving. And as soon as I said that, the whole entire sensation just came to a complete stop. So it's just things like that tend to happen when you do this type of work.
Are you at it because you love it or because you want to learn something about it? What drives you?
Well, we're all headed to the afterlife one day. I think people have a fear of the afterlife because it is the unknown. They don't understand it. It's just a fear. And I'd like to shed some more light on the afterlife to make it not so unnerving. And I've interacted with a lot of different spirits where it's just they seem to be content where they're at for just whatever circumstances that leave them earthbound. It is just stuff that they have to work through.
Years ago, I read both the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, almost like a training ground for people to teach them what you can expect when you die, because they needed that in those days. But I guess we need it today. How have you applied that to some of the work you do now?
Yeah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's interesting with ancient texts. It seems like we have lost knowledge over time. With every generation, knowledge just seems to go by the wayside. And every so often, this knowledge comes back to the surface. I mean, if we turn to physics, the names Schrödinger and Heisenberg, not the guy from Breaking Bad.
That's right. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it seems like those names carry a lot of weight in their field. And it's because, if you look into their backgrounds, they studied ancient texts, particularly one called the Upanishads, which is a Hindu text. So when we look at things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we're able to pull out concepts that have been lost to time. And especially when you decode these things through the eyes of a ghost hunter, you find out things that have eluded ghost hunters for years. I mean, they talk about manipulating energy. They talk about the different realms that you can travel to after you die. I mean, there's just so much we can learn from them. It's just amazing.
What do you think this ghostly realm really is? What's it all about, in your opinion?
So, from the Tibetan point of view, after you die, there's a couple of circumstances that can happen. First off, you'll realize you're dead, and then you'll go on to heaven. I mean, that's probably the most likely scenario. The other two scenarios is that you'll die, you'll be content with that, but you have unfinished business, and you're just going to be hanging around. The last scenario is that you will die, but you're going to be in a state of denial or a state of confusion, and that's really going to mess with your afterlife. And that really gets into the concept of reshaping your world, creating tulpas that I know you guys have talked on your show a lot before. Yeah. And what's interesting is once you start throwing psychology into this, you will see that there are certain applications that can be applied to this that make it more interesting. In fact, there's this thing in psychology called psychoneuroimmunology. Try saying that 3 times fast.
Really? Yeah.
This is the study of the connection between the mind, emotions, and immune system. There's a trinity in the body, and the study of this says that if one of these is affected, they all become affected. For instance, if you ever notice that if you're under emotional stress or whatnot, you're able to catch a cold a lot faster.
That's right. Now your immune system drops.
Right, and that's because there's this the trinity at play. Even the opposite can be affected, where somebody has lost the will to live. They're in the ICU there, and sometimes the nurses will bring in like a kitten or a puppy, and all of a sudden, this sick person just miraculously recovers. And it's just because, their emotions are lifted, their immune system is lifted. And so this trinity, what's interesting about this is when a person dies, this trinity is broken. Of course, one is the immune system, and when somebody dies, the body is left behind, leaving the immune system behind. So what we're left with is the mind and emotions. So what happens after that point is those two things that are left behind are amplified. It's similar to when someone loses the sense of sight. The other senses kind of jump in and pick up the slack, and they almost have superhero levels of hearing and whatnot. And the same thing applies to when somebody crosses over to the afterlife. So a lot of interesting things happen after the point of death.
Well, with Chris Bores, of course, his book is called Ghost Hunting 2.0. His website linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com, pursuitoftheparanormal.com, where he's got some pretty cool videos up there on some of the work that he has done. Of all the experiences that you've undertaken, Chris, or ghost tours or investigations, is there that one that stands out for you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I have a long story to kind of convey to your audience that's very powerful.
All right.
One of the places, one of the very first places that I went to figure out if this new approach to ghost hunting really works was going to a place called St. Augustine Lighthouse in St. Augustine, Florida. This place is amazing for anybody who is interested in the paranormal. There is a bunch of spirits that hang around the place. One in particular is a young girl named Eliza. Now, this young girl, we interacted with her for quite a long time, and when you said at the start of the program that I have interacted with spirits for at least 90 minutes, that's one of the places that we did that. And to show you how well this stuff works, I mean, the first time out, we ended up getting a 90-minute interaction with the spirits at the St. Augustine Lighthouse. But the interesting thing about this investigation is when we were interacting with these spirits there came a point where I asked a question. I said, is being dead the same as being alive? Now, that question had brought the conversation that we were having to a complete halt. We were getting spikes on command. We were getting our questions answered. And when I asked that question, things just stopped, and I couldn't figure out why. it took us a good 10 minutes to lure her back into our conversation before we could start asking her questions again. And when we did this, I was like, okay, I'll just start asking fluff questions again because I don't want to scare her away. Maybe I embarrassed her or whatnot. But another 10 minutes passed by, and I was like, okay, I think we're at a good point where I can ask another deeper question. And then I asked the question, do you have a body? Because we had asked a series of questions that led me to wonder if she had a little body or if she was just a floating ball of light. And once she left our conversation a second time.
Huh.
So I started to sit there thinking, okay, now what do these two questions have in common? I'm so baffled as why she keeps leaving our conversation. And I started to think, well, maybe she's not allowed to talk about this stuff. So again, it took another 10 minutes to lure her back into the room. I had to really use psychology to bring her back into the room. But once I was able to do that, I asked her point blank, I said, are there certain things that you're not allowed to tell us? And the meter spiked. And then I asked, okay, are there rules to the afterlife? The meter spiked again. And I said, okay, are there certain things we as humans are not supposed to know about? The meter spiked again. And then I said, somebody else, the other investigator that I work with, Alan Sisko, jumped in, and he said, will you get in trouble if you talk about these things? And once you know, the meter spiked again. Now, to get answers to these questions just really blew us away. I mean, it just really opened the door for deeper discussions where it's like, okay, well, what are these rules that they have to follow? Since there are rules, who's policing the afterlife? How will they be punished? And it just led me on a search to find the answers to these questions. And the answers to some of those questions are quite revealing. And I try to answer them as best as I could in my book. So it's a very interesting read.
Were there some answers that you just could never get?
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time I have asked a spirit since about the spirit realm on if there are rules or anything pertaining to these rules, the conversation always comes to a complete halt. That is one question that will derail a conversation with a spirit in no time flat. And I've done this with 4 or 5 different spirits.
What do the spirits want, Chris? I mean, obviously you've got a connection. We'll talk after the break on how that happened for you. But in your opinion, what do they want? Do they want to communicate with us? Do they want to give their dearly loved ones a message? What's their motivation?
Well, it's interesting. When you talk to the spirits, most of them, 9 times out of 10, the spirits have unfinished business. And when you start bringing the Tibetan Book of the Dead into this, you will find that there's a psychological profile for just about every type of spirit that you can find out in the field. Now, there are certain kinds of spirits that I've classified. I've come up with a whole different variety of different spirits. And when you ask what do they want, many times they have unfinished business. Now, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, these spirits that are hanging around, they're all clinging to something, they're all craving. It's just their nature to hang around, whether it's unfinished business, wanting human form again. It's all the levels of clinging and craving. And that's pretty much all they want.
Are they getting what they want?
Many times no. And you can see that with the rise in haunted activity worldwide. I don't want to say it's an epidemic, but it just seems like there's something that we're missing, and it's causing all these spirits to remain earthbound. And, I mean, just look at our culture. We're more materialistic than ever, and it's going to cause people to cling and crave things that will keep them from moving on.
All right, we're going to come back in a moment and talk more with Chris Bores. And In our last hour, we'll open up the phone lines and have you join in as we're kind of inching our way toward Ghost to Ghost in a couple weeks. I'm George Noory, and we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Chris Bores with us as we talk about his work. And tell us a little bit about Ghost Hunting 2.0, the book, Chris.
So I've been working on this book for about 2 or 3 years now, and it's just the culmination of my research. Now, one of the things I've done, and is a major part of the book, is taking the spirit realm and pretty much creating a classification of spirits. And this is done by really getting into the psychology of a spirit and breaking that down. Once you do that, you will see that there's actually a type of evolution that a spirit goes through. And this, of course, explains why a spirit can be the nice old lady down the street and how she can just go from that to being a demonic type spirit. I lay all that stuff out and really get into the psychology of the spirit world.
Chris, when you communicate with the other side, how did this happen for you? Was it a gift? Were you trained? Did it just happen? What happened?
Yeah, it shouldn't be mistaken that I have any kind of psychic powers or any kind of mediumship abilities. I don't. Now, there's sometimes I will feel sensitive if something's in a room. But being a tour guide, I've seen that a lot of people feel that way. So I don't know if it's just I am special or not. The jury's still out on that. But it's just, you really have to come at the spirit world with a heightened sensibility and just come at it with a way that nobody's really approached it before. And one of the ways I've really excelled at this is, like I said before, once you start getting interactions with a spirit, you have to know how to deal with each different spirit type that you're dealing with and change your plan accordingly.
How important is technology these days to do what you do? Special cameras, recording devices, things like that.
It's interesting. It seems like every month there's a new gadget or device that comes out, and it's hard staying on top of technology, but I really try to use the devices that produce a lot of great results. They're simplistic, as with the K2 meter, the Ovilus. I'm supposed to show up on the show Hardcore Pawn very soon to show off my skills with the Ovilus, and we had some great interactions happening on there. There was a point where I went up to one of the old jukeboxes that they had.
Yes.
And Ovilus, I like to call this thing a voice box for the dead because it just takes the energy in an area and associate a word to it. And when I went up to this jukebox, the word records came up. So, the jukebox does play records. And then I got a second word that came up that said country. So I looked in the machine, and the playlist was all country music.
Huh.
So it's just, very fascinating, some of the weird coincidences that happen with these devices.
Have you found that the spirit world is different? There are different kinds of apparitions or entities out there?
Yeah, absolutely. When you start decoding a lot of these ancient texts, you'll see that there's places like heaven and hell. Everyone has a heaven and hell. Every place also has a limbo type area. They call it by a different name, but every place has this limbo type area, and it's just a place of darkness, a place where your mind can create manifestations that knock you off the path that you're supposed to travel. The reason that I like the Tibetan Book of the Dead so much is that it really gets very specific in all the different realms that one can go to after you die. You have like the heaven realm, you have hell, but they also lay out other realms like the God realm. This is a realm where don't think of like God, the biblical God. Think of like the Roman gods. They were flawed. They were very egotistical. That's where spirits like that go. There's the jealous God realm. This is where people who are very avarice in nature go. They're very cunning, devious. They want what everybody else has.
Yeah.
It talks about the human realm, the realm we occupy right now that we have to that we leave from when we die. And then you can also de-evolve into realms like the animal realm. You know, if you're very carnalistic in your mindset, that's where you're going to go. And then the last realm that it spells out is the hungry ghost realm.
Hungry ghost? What's that?
The hungry ghost realm. This is what makes the Tibetan Book of the Dead worth its weight in gold to a ghost hunter. And I'm so surprised that no other ghost hunter uses this text. I mean, just Google it. I'm the only one that comes up. But the hungry ghost realm, like I said before, it lays out a psychological profile for why a spirit is earthbound in the afterlife. And it's dubbed the hungry ghost because they are hungry to fulfill their cravings, their unfinished business. It's just, you know, a state of mind that you want to not be in.
But if you're in that state of mind, how do you get out of it?
There's a systematic way. Now, one of the things, once you start getting to the classifications of spirits that I've come up with 6. And, of course, one of the classifications is the hungry spirit, which is based off the hungry ghost concept. And the best way for them to move on is for them to break the cycle and figure out, okay, the thing that I want to attain is is unattainable. I can't do it. And once they realize that, they can move on. You know, once you start decoding a lot of the hauntings that occur around the U.S., you will find that a lot of them are this hungry spirit. I know there's a place near you, George, the Queen Mary.
Oh, yes. Been there many times. There's something strange about that place, Chris.
Well, I haven't been there yet, but I know through my research there's this ghost called Jackie. And what I've come to learn by researching this is that this spirit is really drawn to attention. It just seems like this is a place where she can get attention. You know, ghost hunters are going there every day trying to seek her out. And, you know, actually that'll hurt her chances of moving on because she loves the attention. She is at a place where she can fulfill her need of wanting attention.
Is that why they don't move on?
It could be. It just depends what they're craving. Sometimes spirits, all they want to do is let someone know that, hey, I'm alive and well in the afterlife. You hear all the time that a spirit will start causing a haunting in a place, and then after they figure out, oh, hey, it's so and so. After they figure that out, the haunting seems to stop, and it's because all they wanted to do was convey that, yeah, I survived the experience. I'm content now. I can move on.
Where do demons fit in, Chris, with some of this? Because they're not your normal spirits. What are they, in your opinion?
No, they're not. So once you start getting into the other classifications of spirits that I have, you'll see that the mind starts spiraling down to a very dark place. Now, when someone dies, I mentioned before that the mind is amplified and emotions are amplified. Now, when this happens, I mentioned the Trinity too. The Trinity is broken, and what happens is the mind and emotions start latching out for another part to complete this Trinity. And of course, the only thing in the afterlife is energy. And I've heard you say many times before that you think that energy is like the nervous system to the universe. So what happens is that these two things latch on to this nervous system of the universe, and now the mind and emotions can start affecting your afterlife reality. So if you die and you're very confused, or if you're in a state of denial, let's say you died very tragic, you have to work through that. If you're in a state of denial, your mind will start warping your world into one where maybe you are still alive, because your mind is manipulating afterlife reality, because it's all connected. And this is how tulpas can start creating things like residual hauntings. Now, when a lot of investigators talk about residual hauntings, they're absolutely stumped why they talk or they'll interact with them only briefly, and then nothing else will happen. Well, that's because they are so confused that they have warped their reality into something that it's not, and they've just momentarily kind of broken through. So once you start getting into that type of mindset, the mind and emotions just start feeding upon itself. And this can even happen if a spirit is in a hungry state of mind. That can just feed upon itself. The hunger can spiral them out of control to the point where they become very demonic in their nature. And it becomes a very frightening thing to deal with when that happens.
When these spirits tend to start interacting with us in visitations and things like that, a lot of people don't want anything to do with them. A lot of people think they may be their departed loved ones. Where do you fit on this? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, I found that there's a lot of subdivisions that I have when you classify spirits. And when you talk about loved ones that hang around, those are also a form of hungry spirit. Now, of course, they don't have the level of hunger that, say, the spirit of Jackie has at the Queen Mary. But when you psychologically break it down, yeah, it is a form of craving. But it's a good form of craving because they just want to watch over their loved ones. They want to stick around to see what happens. The trouble is that once this hunger starts overtaking your spiritual development, then it becomes a problem. There's been cases, too, I know, especially with the demonic, where you get into another subdivision of what I call destructive spirits. Anything that is destructive, like demons or whatever, I label as destructive. And one of the categories that I've also lumped in there are these mimic spirits. These are spirits that come in, they're craving attention, they're craving, a destructive lifestyle and want to seek destruction in others. They come in and kind of take the form of a loved one, but certain things just don't add up. They'll start swearing, they'll make the person feel bad, they'll say things that the person would normally not say. So there's all kinds of different types of spirits that can take on that form.
Do they trick us?
Yeah, some do. It just depends on the nature. And, of course, when I do this type of work, you will run into these type of spirits. There was one time where I was doing an investigation on one of my ghost tours, and I was in the basement, and, I had a really weird encounter in there a couple nights previously. So when we got into another conversation with the spirits there, I asked, hey, is there something that we should be afraid of in this building? After I asked that question, all our conversation ceased. For 5 minutes, our meters did not spike, nothing happened, but all of a sudden, something felt like it was just rolling in. As the best way I could describe it is a rolling darkness. And everybody in my tour group, there's maybe 10, 15 people, everybody started feeling cold spots. They started seeing shadows racing past them. I saw a flash of light where I couldn't explain where it came from. Everything got really, really weird. And it's just those type of incidences that make ghost hunting a little unnerving.
Are you glad you're doing this? Are you having fun?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm getting so much insight from the spirits. And it's kind of refreshing because when you watch these ghost hunting shows, they do the same thing over and over again. Even if they're using new tools, they keep using the same approach and ideologies that everybody else uses, and they can't really get into the nitty-gritty. Case in point, I was watching Ghost Adventures a couple weeks ago, and the main character, Zach, he was in the basement, and he was at this hotel. I can't remember the name of it, but he was at the bar. And he had this Frank's box out, and all of a sudden he got this complete sentence of what I can only label as a bartender asking him if he would like another drink. Now, of course, when you look at that, he had no idea how to explain this. But once you start applying my research over top of this, you'll see that this is a spirit. Yes, it's a residual haunting, but here's a confused spirit. This is another classification that I've come up with. It's a confused spirit that has warped his world around him so that he still feels like he's serving drinks to his patrons. And, of course, the only reason Zach broke into his reality is because, he sat at the table like a normal bar patron would, and, of course, the bartender is going to interact with them. The interesting part of this that no one's really picked up on is that Zach was not able to interact with the spirit again because he broke character. Once you break character, you basically get shut out of their reality. And this is why trigger objects work very, very well at places like Gettysburg. We get a lot of reports of people who dress up in uniform usually get the most interaction with spirits, and that's why. They're able to break into this reality where they have canceled out all the distractions.
Was there ever a time, Chris, that you did not believe the other side existed, that it was just nothing after you died?
No, I kind of always believed. Growing up, I always watched the ghost shows. Unsolved Mysteries was a big show that we used to watch, and every Halloween season they would do a Halloween episode. And, of course, I was very young at the time when they did this, so it would scare the bejesus out of me every year. But I kept watching. It was just like this drug. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is so fascinating. And, of course, I didn't realize, this would lead me to where I am today. But there's never been a point in time where I thought, okay, when you die, that's the end.
I had that feeling once. It went away pretty darn fast, and I got to tell you, it's a very stark, lonely feeling. I didn't like it at all.
Well, what's interesting is when you study all these different religions, like Kabbalah, Judaism, ancient Egyptian mythology, you'll see that the afterlife goes on. And the interesting thing about the Egyptian Book of the Dead is that it was inscribed on the walls of funeral chambers. So when you think about that and sit down and go, why did they do that? Who does this benefit? You come to the conclusion that, wait a minute, if it's in the burial chambers, this must benefit spirits in the afterlife. A spirit can't sit there and open up a papyrus scroll or flip through a book. The best way for them to learn, even in the afterlife, is through an inscription that's on the wall. And the Egyptians had the insight to tell us that, yeah, there is an afterlife and there is a way to transcend and keep on learning.
Chris, we will come back in a moment and take phone calls with you and continue chatting, because some people also think that there's a alien or extraterrestrial tie-in to the spirit world. I want to get your reaction to that when we come back. Folks, make sure you're liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter as well. Lots of information coming out of that, both of them every day. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. With Chris Bores, our special guest, and your calls as we talk about the other side on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to our final hour here with Chris Bores, and we're going to take some phone calls with him as well. His book, Ghost Hunting 2.0. Chris, where do you get the book?
It's available on Amazon, my website. It should be available just about any bookseller out there.
Did you have fun writing it?
Yes, I probably spent way more time on it than I should, but I've got tons of stories in there. I try to break down everything as best as I could, and of course, everything that I bring into this field of research, I have a reason for doing so, and I try to make it very simple for people to follow, and just for professional ghost hunters and amateurs alike, they could really learn more about the spirit world from reading this. And, one of the first conversations that I had with a spirit, the 90-minute one, I also produced a documentary called Pursuit of the Paranormal, which showcases a lot of interesting things and a lot of interesting questions that we pose to spirits and get answers to.
What have you heard about the possibility that ETs, aliens, might be misconstrued for spirits?
Well, it's interesting because there are a couple researchers out there that say that when, or I should say, in a lot of instances where UFOs or aliens are involved, the paranormal is also involved. And if you look at the research of people like Thomas Horn, Chris Putnam in the book Exo Vaticana, they come to a really interesting conclusion that these aliens or whatnot could be demons from hell. I mean, they really lay out a good conclusion. But with my research, I would like to add another layer on top of that. When we look at things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we find that there are more realms that exist beyond just heaven and hell. And when you start taking aliens and comparing them to demons, something just doesn't add up. Their end game seems to be very different. With aliens, you have beings that are very cunning, they're very sneaky, they want to cover up any traces of being around. Of course, both types of beings are causing pain to humans. It just seems very different in contrast of demons, who are, if you talk to Catholic priests, they will say that demons are very boisterous, they're egotistical, they will actually gloat about all their conquests of trying to get a human to try to injure themselves or kill themselves. So the end games of both these types seem very, very different. And when you take the psychological profile of what an alien is, we find that in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's actually a realm that the inhabitants of are very similar in nature to an alien, and that is the realm of the jealous gods. These are beings that are cunning. They want things that the other realms have that they don't. It sounds very similar to aliens trying to take our DNA and whatnot. It's just very, very similar. And I don't think anybody has really looked at it from that perspective. But one interesting case that I would like to throw in here is that is a case called the Skull Sessions. And these were done in the Skull, England in the 1990s. Now, the interesting thing about this case is there was one evening where they were, or let me explain what these sessions were for people who don't know. Sure. These were a series of sessions done by a group of mediums. They were trying to channel a bunch of spirits in the afterlife to learn more about the afterlife. Well, there came a point in their conversation where they wanted to try to get a video of one of the spirits that they were talking to, and they said, "Is this possible?" And they said, or the spirit talking through this person said, "Yes, it is possible. I will tell you how." And it's kind of hard to explain over the phone, but they ended up setting up a series of mirrors so that the lens could record the video feed coming out of the viewfinder. So when you do this, it would create a tunnel-like distortion effect. Now, when they asked the spirit to manifest in this distortion that was created, wouldn't you know, an alien head popped up for several seconds, and it's clear as day. You could see an alien head, and they tried this experiment a couple times, and every time this alien head would pop up. So I think there's really something to this where aliens, whether they're from hell or the jealous god realm, I think there's something to it where these gray type aliens could be part of the paranormal world.
Okay, let's go to some of the phone calls here for you. Let us go first to Steve in the state of Maine. Stephen, go ahead.
Morning, George. Morning, Chris.
Morning.
Great show tonight.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions for you, and then I'll take my answers off the air. One, have you ever been, attached, a spirit attached to you, and you've taken it home like some of the TV celebrities, we won't mention any names, have seemed to always be possessed during their shows? And then the second question, comment questions. My mom was down in Florida, part of a paranormal group. She now moved up here to Maine, and she's looking for a paranormal group up here. We have looked via the internet. Is there any particular way to find a paranormal group in my area? and that we can somehow manage to contact to join up with. And I'll take my answers off the air. Thanks again. Have a great night.
Okay. What about the attachments? Like, Chris, have you ever been attached by something evil or some kind of spirit?
Now, in the book, I lay out a lot of different prayers and things that you can say after you leave a haunted area. Because, yes, there was one time where something did follow me home because I was kind of careless. I was at a place where I didn't think something would follow me home. So I do lay out some prayers that you can do because I'm very spiritual in this approach. And when I had this spirit follow us home, we have kids here. So that was the first person that they interacted with. They were up in their room playing under their bed, and they heard a voice call out to them while they're playing. The one girl said, where's my stuffed animal? And this voice, this unseen entity said, where's my shoe? And growled right after that. So, they came down and got me, and of course, I had to go up there and take care of business. But if you get the book, I have prayers in there. I have ways of cleansing out homes, and cleansing out your home is very beneficial. Not aside from also cleaning it out, aside from spirits, because you have no idea what happened in an area over the lifetime of a home. If you move in, sometimes that energy just can cause you problems. So it's always best to clean out your home, and it just makes it a very good living conditions.
And I want to give Steve a website here. Steve, just think of this website. I know you're driving. ParanormalSocieties.com. ParanormalSocieties.com. And then when you click that, you click Find a Society, and then click the state of Maine. You'll have about 28 paranormal groups out there, and then interview them. See which ones that your mom might be more comfortable with. And, Chris, any other suggestions on that?
I think that about covers it. I'm not really too sure of how to find a group.
Okay, yeah, this is a pretty good webpage for that. Let's go to Herb, truck driving in Illinois. Good morning, Herb. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, George?
Good.
The question I have for your guest is, here in Illinois, I used to live on the old Mantino Mental Health Center's grounds. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's really haunted. And they started knocking buildings down, and I ended up with a house that was built on the grounds.
Oh.
And my children were really young, and we had a toy car, remote control race car that would zoom across the floor for no reason. We had the doors would howl and hoot all night long. And when I would go down to the crawl space to look at something down there, it's just a scary feeling. The Mantino Veterans Home, it closed in the mid-'80s. My grandmother used to work there, and she said they used to keep the patients in line, they would soak them in ice water or hot water, or they would wrap bars of soap and towels, and they would beat them with those. It's just a real creepy place. Has he ever heard of that?
I have not, but there's so many places like that around the U.S. You kind of lose track of them at some point.
Chris, some of the haunted bed and breakfast places all over the country are popping up everywhere. Is it a fad, or what's going on?
That I don't know too much about. There's another type of spirit that I address in the book. I have 6 of them in all, and we've already addressed like the hungry ghost, the confused spirit. But this is just another spirit type that I talk about called the stuck spirit. Now, when a spirit dies, when somebody dies who becomes a spirit, they can become hungry. And from there, all sorts of different categories can form in their mindset. And one of them is the stuck spirit. And this is where they kind of become a very, how should I say, introverted in their actions. They don't want to leave an area. They feel a comfort with it. They don't want to leave their comfort zone. And it sounds to me like that's what you're most likely dealing with there. The other type of spirit which is the exact opposite, is the wandering spirit. If you're comfortable in your afterlife, you can start going out and being like a tourist of the afterlife. And, even if we turn to Bulgarian lore and mythology, they have a thing in there that says, or a belief system that says they have 40 days to travel with their guardian angel to places that they knew in life before moving on. And then, of course, the other spirit type that we have is the destructive spirits, which the mind's spiraling and feeding upon itself. And then the last one is the non-human spirit. And these are any spirit that comes from a different realm into our own.
Those seem to be the scariest, non-human ones.
Yeah, they do. And, I've also lumped in things like angels, tulpas, and, these tulpas kind of take on a form of their own, where we're starting to see things like the Slender Man and the children, the black-eyed children.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting how this thing is reshaping. It seems like in the yesteryears, people were seeing gnomes and goblins and whatnot. And now we're seeing Slender Men and these children. So it's just every time period seems to have their own tulpas that are being created by the mindset of a community.
Let's go to Nita in Florida. Hello, Nita. Welcome to the show.
Hey, George. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
How y'all doing? I just had a question, Chris, about what evidence do you have that a hungry spirit or a spirit you said that had unfinished business, how do you know that they have a choice to stay and they're not, that God doesn't say you've got to go to heaven or the devil's you're going to hell? I mean, how do they get to decide that they stay? Or, they may not decide it, but how's that in their control?
Well, a lot of the spirits that I deal with, I have ways to figure out, what type of spirit I'm dealing with. That is the biggest part of my research, is trying to figure out what type of spirit I'm dealing with, because then I can structure my approach accordingly. So one of the things that I do to figure out if this is a hungry ghost is by using food. A lot of different cultures use food offerings in their rituals of honoring the dead. So even at the St. Augustine Lighthouse, I offered up food to the spirits there, and they really resonated to the food. So this is just, another form of clinging, craving that these spirits have, to kind of separate them from spirits that are supposed to be here. If we look at a passage from the Book of Enoch, it talks about, the one spirit type that I addressed called the wandering spirit, where if you're judged, one of the punishments is that you have to wander the earth for an undetermined amount of time. Even if we turn to Judaism, we find that they have a similar belief system. And there are a couple cases out there, exorcism cases, where a rabbi was able to talk to one of these spirits doing the possession of a young girl, and they asked them why they were punished and the terms of that. And they said, they were supposed to wander around to fulfill their punishment for an undisclosed amount of time.
Probably the end of time, right?
Right. So, that's just part of that.
The spirit world that we have been taught is supposed to be God-fearing. Does that have anything to do with it? I don't know anymore.
Well, once you get into the judgment process, it can be harsh. I mean, if you lived your life in a very evil way, the outcome is not going to be good. When we start decoding the things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Judaism, we find that karma plays a big part in where we go in the afterlife. With these realms, when we die, they say that meditation is a good thing for kind of calming your mind and figuring out where you need to go next. Because if you don't, you could accidentally, fall back into the human realm and be reincarnated. You could end up in the jealous God realm. And the ultimate end game is you want to calm your mind and figure out, okay, how do I get to heaven? How do I ascend to these pure realms where we all want to go? And of course, how you lived your life is going to determine where you go. It's just like a hummingbird being drawn to nectar. When we live through life, we're going to acquire a karma to our body, and in the afterlife, each realm is going to resonate with that karma and pull us into it. So, there's different levels to this where a person can just go to hell, or they could be attracted to hell based on how they lived.
Chris, we're going to take this break. We'll come back with some final phone calls here. With everything that you've done and studied on the afterlife, have you concluded how it all started?
That gets into a lengthy discussion. Do we have time for that?
Probably not until we come back. So why don't you think about that, and we'll come back in a moment. Chris Bores, our special guest, his book, Ghost Hunting 2.0, website pursuitoftheparanormal.com, which we've got linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com as well. And talking about the strange and unusual, don't forget to sign up at paranormaldate.com and just have some fun. And let's hope that you meet somebody and you'll get married on the program. I would do that. I really would. Paranormaldate.com. Don't touch your dial. We'll come back with final phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Dr. Heather Lynn joins us to talk about some ancient mysteries. So make sure you're part of that Coast to Coast program. And when we come back in a moment with Chris Bores, we're going to take final phone calls, and he's going to ponder this $64,000 question. What's it all about on the other side? Okay, welcome back to Coast. George Noory with you, Chris Bores, our special guest. And Chris, before we take final questions for you, the big question, how was it formed? Why was it formed? Really, what's it all about?
Yeah, so I'll try to explain this as quickly as I can. When we turn to Tibetan philosophy, we find, the 6 realms of existence, and we find that the spirit can either evolve or de-evolve. And there's different realms for that. There's the animal realm, which someone can de-evolve to, or you can ascend to the heaven realms. And when we turn to other philosophies like the Bible, it's actually encoded in there, in Genesis, about the evolution of where we're all headed. Now, I don't address any of this in my book. This is something I'm going to do in a future book, so you're really putting me to the task here, George.
Sure thing.
But, the answer to that is encoded in some of the first lines in Genesis. We find that the first line is, God spoke, and light was created. Well, before light was created, what had to happen? God had to speak. So when he spoke, he sent vibrations into the universe. So that was the first thing that was formed. And then light was formed. And then once you start going to the 7 days of creation, we start to see the different levels of reality that our soul goes through. So in the first couple of days, we're the heavens and the earth. We become the waters of the planets, and then we become plants, and then the animals were created, and then humans were created. So once you start lining this up with philosophies in Kabbalah and the Tibetan philosophy, you see that, this is the evolution of a spirit. And of course, once you turn to the end of the Bible in Revelations, you'll see that humanity ultimately is going to ascend into heaven with Jesus. In other words, we're going to become bodies of light, and that's pretty much what we're trying to achieve, becoming a body of light and transcending, the 6 realms of existence, the human realm, and going up to heaven.
Since you brought up the book of Revelation, what do you think of that end-time prophecy? Do you think we're in it now?
I think people are doing a really good job of decoding that. I've heard so many theories, it's hard to put my trust into just one, but I haven't really studied it to the extent of other people have.
Okay, let's go to the phones now. Joe is truck driving in Colorado. Joe, thank you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Joseph.
Hey. Great to hear you guys. I just had a question. my two younger children have, I believe, have been very perceptive to people's auras, and I've practiced meditation for years. Like I said, with my kids, and they definitely can sense people's personalities. So I'm wondering, in connection with that and to the spirit world, are there any types of meditation techniques that would be conducive to enhancing psychic ability or psychic phenomenon, so to speak?
You give it your take, Chris, and then I'll give it mine.
Well, I don't know if it'll enhance it. I just know from what I've read that meditation will help you in the afterlife because you're basically, if you're a confused spirit, you're entering into a dreamlike state that you can't escape. And if you meditate, you're more likely to have lucid dreams. I found that out from talking to a lot of people. And this lucid dream state helps in the afterlife of popping out of that false reality that confused spirits create around them. And it just, if you find yourself in that type of situation, meditation does help.
I also think that you really have to remove any kind of negativity that might be surrounding you, because I think, with energy, it pulls you down. And when it does, you're never going to be able to communicate or get tuned in. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it does. And I lay this out in the book too. There are people who, when they're so angry, you could just feel their anger oozing off of them. And that's because they're just creating these negative energy tulpas around them. The opposite works with religious leaders. If you're around them, you will feel nothing but positive energy around them. And when we die, you want to make sure that you do have that positive energy around you.
Well, you sure do. Okay, thanks. Let's go to John in Sykeston, Missouri, east of the Rockies. Hey, John, go ahead. Welcome to the program. Good to have you on.
Good to talk to you, George. I've been listening 20-some years to me driving, but I want to thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Evelyn Paglini for y'all helped me track down a demon that was taking my wife.
Ah, okay. That worked out for you?
Well, I tracked down to a picture. He appeared in front of me in my house. I rebuked him in the name of Christ. And I done what y'all told me, and I got rid of it. I want to thank y'all for that. Y'all really helped me.
Good. Okay, any questions for Chris, or was that it?
No, I just want to tell people that stuff ain't no joke. Don't go playing around with it and stuff like that, because you will get attached to you. I've done plenty calls, and I've seen people possessed, and then, it's not funny. So just be careful.
You got that right. All right, good advice, too. And let me ask you, Chris, Ouija boards. What do you think of them?
Oh, man, yeah, I dedicate a small chapter, a part of a chapter to Ouija boards. This is just a normal, or another part of a spirit clinging to something. Of course, the Ouija board is one of the communication devices that they can use to talk to the living. So they're going to see value in something like this. Now, you had a guest on, I forget his name, but he said that sometimes there have been reports where when people will burn their Ouija boards and destroy them, that they'll actually hear a cry come from the board. And this is most likely because the spirit is clinging onto it so tightly that they're just really upset when it's destroyed.
Yes, we've heard that many, many times, too. Dave in San Francisco, it's your turn, David. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, Dave. Thank you.
I was a canine handler at Clark Air Base in the Philippines in the early 70s.
Okay.
I want to know what happened to me. I was assigned to a special duty out in the Camp O'Donnell, which was the old prisoner of war camp for the people from Bataan Death March. When I was out there, it was a crazy night all night long. And the dog was just going crazy. All of a sudden, I guess it was halfway through the shift, I felt myself just grabbed and thrown against I guess it was a post, and my hands were tied. It was partly cloudy that night, and a cloud moved from in front. It was, you could see from the moonlight. I I saw, I guess, the Japanese soldiers holding rifles, and they just felt grabbed, and the rifles fired. I felt a pain in my chest, and I guess, I don't know what happened. I woke up. I called, we didn't have any radios. I popped the slap flare. The flight NCO come out. I've had that dream ever since. What happened to me?
What a dream.
So is that a dream, or is that something that you actually experienced?
It was a dream, Chris.
Okay. It could have been maybe something that happened in a prior life, I would say. That's the best way I could describe.
What do you think of dreams? I think dreams are very powerful. I think lots of things happen in your dream state that could be precognitive, or they're trying to tell you something.
Yeah, there are a lot of practices out there, even in Tibetan culture, where you can try to figure out, what you came back to try to work out in this life. And, sometimes you have to keep coming back over and over and over again to work through that. And maybe, his dream is just something from previous life that he's still trying to work out.
Well, that could be too. I would guess a lot of people come to you for advice, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Especially with spiritual problems.
Yeah, you're like a counselor. Can you rid spirits from a house?
I have. I just did I lay out one case in the book where I ended up going to a house where something nasty was occurring. A friend of mine, she had an incident happen where the bathtub filled by itself and the water smelled like sulfur. And, of course, whenever the smell of sulfur is involved, it means bad news. So I went in there, did what I did. I had my obelisk with me. And, of course, like I said, this is what I call a voice box of the dead. And when I went in there, I started to get a very nasty string of words. I went into the basement, asked the question, is there anything that you would like me to remove from this house? And almost instantaneously, the word Bible came over the obelisk. So I said, okay, can you give me more to go on? And then I got this string of words that said dark, down, descend, and then the last one was demon. And, of course, when you get words like that, you're not dealing with something that's pleasant.
Well,
so,
that's true.
So of course, I do have prayers and things that I use to cleanse an area.
Let's go to Robert, King, North Carolina, first-time caller. Robert, go ahead, sir.
Hey there. All right, I'll try to make this as short as possible. 12 years ago, I lost my father. He had shot himself.
Oh, gosh.
And it was actually the week of my birthday, which was actually just last Wednesday. He done it on the 5th, of course, so now this week that week of October is always kind of hard for me. Anyway, about a month after his passing, me and my cousin were sitting around my apartment, and when my dad would visit, he would just walk in. I mean, it wasn't no big thing to me. And so we're sitting there one night, door's locked. Well, all of a sudden the door opens up. It kind of cracks open about a foot. And me and my cousin just both kind of look at each other. Okay, who's going to get up and shut the door? Well, when I got up and shut the door, that's when I realized that the door had been locked. So didn't think nothing about it, put it on the back burner for a few minutes. We're sitting there watching something on TV. The dog's up on the couch. Well, all of a sudden the dog's chew ball, whatever, went rolling across the floor, and it's like, okay. So first we're like, where's the dog at? That's when we noticed the dog's underneath the blanket, just sleeping. But I guess my question, and that's the only, I had a vivid dream that he appeared, during a poker game that me and he used to always get into with some friends of his, and, in the dream, I remember him vividly telling me that he had faked his death, but, I seen the body, so I knew that was fake, but I remember getting very, very upset in the dream. And at the time I was married, I had remarried, and my wife had to wake me up because she said I kind of got a little violent,
in your dream state. Yeah, you can do that.
But honestly, and I've only been listening to your show for almost about 6 or 7 weeks now.
Okay, well, I'm glad you found us.
Well, I'm glad I found it too, because I work from 4:30 in the evening to 3 o'clock in the morning. So on the way home, that's when I listen to you. And I've heard you talking to other guests that you've had on about psychics and things like that. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, one, I mean, because like I said, I've only had those 2 experiences about my father, and the one in the apartment is the only thing I can figure, because he's the only one that would ever just walk in without knocking. And the other is where would I go? Who could I contact website-wise, anything else, to try to get some closure on this? Because he had actually called me the morning that he had actually shot himself, and to this day I kind of blame myself because I didn't answer the phone.
Well, don't do that.
Because I was asleep. I was asleep, and and it's always pondered in my head for 12 years. And had I heard the phone, would he still be here? And I'm for me and my family, a lot of the family kind of has put it on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like I said, it's the week of my birthday. It was 2 days before I turned 28 at the time. It's just one of those things that it's rough for me. And when that was the first show I'd actually heard, was when you were talking about psychics and this, that, and the other, and I was like, let me listen to this guy a little more, because, and I got intrigued in a lot of other things that you talk about, but I figured that was, kind of a good little ghost story to go along with what you're talking about, and,
Well, first of all, Robert, don't beat yourself up over this thing, because you didn't get to the call. It doesn't matter, I don't think. Chris, and in this case, I think his father's trying to communicate with him, probably trying to tell him don't feel guilty. What do you think?
Yeah, first off, my condolences. That's very tragic and hard to go through. You might want to seek out maybe a religious institution to talk to, or maybe a psychiatrist. It's obviously not your fault, and it's something you're working through. But in the afterlife, if somebody's life is taken that way, it's something they have to work through in the afterlife. But you could probably take solace in this. When he said, I didn't die that way, I think he's maybe trying to get at that this reality is, for all intents and purposes, it can be a false reality. There are Gnostic scriptures out there where Jesus is talking to Peter, saying, look, this entire realm, it's a false reality, and we're just trying to make our way through it. So, yeah, best of luck on trying to handle with that type of a situation.
It's not easy when something like that happens at all, but I think the spirits truly try to communicate, don't they?
Yeah, and there's certain spirits around the U.S. that you can interact with that have gone through a tragedy of taking their own life and whatnot, and you find that, they're still working through things. And it's just, something they have to deal with.
Do we have time for another call? Probably not. So, Chris, what do you do on Halloween?
Doing a bunch of ghost tours at the Collingwood Art Center in Toledo, Ohio. So that's on my plate.
So when people are on a ghost tour, what are they looking for? Are they trying to get scared? Do they want to be scared?
Yeah, we try to get interactions with spirits. I have my own skill sets that I try to interact with them. And once that happens, I try to ask some really valid questions. One of the things I'm trying to do now is question them on some of the things that I've learned from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I've asked things like, are you bound by time where you are? And they've said that, yes, they're bound by time like we are in the living state. And just recently I asked, can you see in the dark? And every time I ask this question, the spirits always tell me, no, they cannot see in the dark, which baffles me, because that's where you find a lot of different types of spirits in dark recesses.
You would think that they could see just about through anything, my friend. Chris, thank you. Take care of yourself. And who knows, if I ever get back to the Toledo area, we'll look you up. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Bores, and George Knapp. I'm George Noory, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone. 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 Everyone.